Welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. If you are new to this podcast, make sure you follow, like, subscribe, and share. Today, I am hosting our very first Her Version roundtable discussion with these amazing females who are going to be sharing their insights around the topic of divorce. Let's jump right in. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this episode of Her Version, our very first ever roundtable event. I have so many beautiful females here joining me today, and I thank you so much for waking up early on a Saturday and joining me on this topic of divorce, actually. So you guys come from a wealth of experience, and I'm so excited to share questions and comments and experiences with each other and also with our audience. So welcome. How's everyone doing today?
Good.
Yes. Good. Did anyone have as exciting of a morning as I did? I was telling the ladies right before we jumped on that first thing in the morning around 6 o'clock, I woke up bright and early to make sure everything was set up and everything was good. And I totally wiped out in the shower this morning, very first thing, basically rolling out of bed. So that was definitely a turn of events for me and my mental state for the morning. But I thank everyone for being here and being so smiley and so beautiful this morning. So any updates? How is everyone? Good. Excited? Yes. Good. So
always
today,
with you.
Thank you, Lise. So today I am going to be giving away my hosting duties for segments of a time to allow these ladies to introduce themselves and openly discuss topics around divorce that they themselves might have struggled with, that they are dealing with, or that they have seen happen with friends and family. We're going to dig in and peel back the fears that sometimes go with divorce. So first on the list, I am actually going to be opening the floor to Miss Christine. And what we're going to be doing is introducing ourselves, maybe doing a little, backstory of a few sentences. Let us know, who you are, where you're from, and then we're going to jump into a question, and then we're going to open it up to the floor so that people can raise their hands and discuss openly the topic that you have chosen. So we're going to start with Christine.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So my name is Christine Del Negro, and I am an EFT practitioner and a life coach. And EFT, or emotional freedom technique, sometimes people call it tapping. It's a holistic healing modality that helps calm the nervous system and gain clarity over thoughts and emotions so that you can process them and let them go. And I found that when I was going through my divorce about 8 years ago, and it really saved me. It was a turning point in my life personally, and it's something that I've used every day since then. And so I use that with my clients in addition to other coaching modalities to help women figure out what's keeping them stuck and help them let that go so that they can cultivate more joy in their lives. And I was thinking very quickly this morning because I was not supposed to go first. And so Sabrina told me that as we were getting on, and I was like, oh God, wait, I was going to watch the other people go ahead of me so that I could figure out what the hell I'm doing. And, but I think it's a really nice metaphor for when you're going through a divorce or anything in life, you get pushed out of your comfort zone. And for me, my biggest struggle around going through my divorce was that I think one of the main reasons that I stayed in my marriage for so long was because I didn't think I was strong enough to handle anything that, like the idea of being a single parent, or even just the idea of like putting out there that I was unhappy in my marriage, and having those conversations, and, seeing where that went. And, one of the things that I learned was that I am so much stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. And so now I trust myself. And I think that that's one of the things, as I was thinking about this during the week, that I think is a really big struggle. At least it was for me, and I believe it's probably true for other women as well, is that when you're in a relationship or a situation where you're stuffing your feelings down because they're scary and because you don't know how to deal with them, you start to lose trust in yourself. And one of the big challenges as you go through a divorce or any major situation is learning how to trust yourself again, because you have to, because you're going to get yourself through. And the more you can trust yourself and be honest with yourself, even when it's scary, I think the better off you will be. So that is my little nugget of wisdom for the morning. And okay, I've sort of lost track now. But I guess that's I think that's one of my questions. I had several, but one of my questions for you all is, what if you could give advice to a woman who is in the middle of that, whether it's contemplating, moving out of a relationship, or at least putting on the table like, hey, this isn't working for me. Somebody who is in the middle of it and thinking, oh my God, I have no idea how I'm going to get through this. Or someone who's out of the actual marriage and figuring out being a single woman again, if she's a mom, being a single parent. Like, what is the best advice that you could give to somebody that you either wish someone had told you, or that someone did tell you, or you like your big takeaway from your experience?
Torie?
I'll go first. I think with, divorce or being in a bad relationship, I think we all have that, like dark cloud of like, what if? And we tend to just like not even look at it for a while. At least that was the case for me, where it's like, you're not happy, but you're not even going to look at it because this is what you chose and this is where you are. And so if you do look at it, you can follow those fears back to like what the specific fear is. Like mine was that I wasn't going to be able to provide for my son. And so it was like, that's why I was staying. But it is really freaking hard to starve in America. Like, I'm just going to throw that out there. Like, there are so many resources out there. There are so many people that's willing to help. I have a wonderful family who, 5 of them offered to take me in and let me live with them for a while until I got back on my feet. Like, there are so many resources out there. And so, it's like, if your fear is, well, I'm not going to find anybody else, follow that. Like, is the person you're with actually showing you love? Like, are you getting love with this? Or is it, just the security of the appearance of love or something like that? So it's like, you actually look at that dark cloud of fear and you're like, what is the specific fear? Usually the fear is solvable. So I would just encourage everybody to look at what they're actually afraid of in, the scariness of a divorce.
Yeah.
Yes, Torie, I completely agree with you. I think the other thing that I think is really important, that when you're in a relationship and you're considering things, is support. I think a lot of people don't recognize that they can ask for help, whether it's with your family, like you were mentioning, resources, seeking support to help you figure that out. Because I know for myself and many people that I coach, they feel like they're in it alone. They have all of the burdens on their shoulders. They're kind of running the show, so to speak, in their mind and in their life. And it's one of the things that I did is I stepped outside. I recognized that my capacity for asking for advice within my family was maxed out because they had never experienced divorce. They didn't understand, I was going through something that many of the people around me weren't familiar with. So they didn't know how to support. So I recognized I had to step outside of that. And I sought a coach and I, took that path. It was the best decision I ever made. So like you were mentioning, resources, support, who around you can help you figure out your biggest fear, what the next steps are, and you can ask for help.
I'll build on both of those because I love what both of you have shared. I think that the confusion and the frustration comes when in not trusting ourselves. We made this decision. We chose this person. So it almost feels like, well, I'm a bad chooser. I'm bad at knowing. How could I assume that anything is going to change moving forward? So I think it's just so important to do that personal work, to understand that we attract everything energetically, and who we were energetically when we attracted that obviously has shifted because it's not working for us anymore. So getting clear that we're going to be a different sort of magnet now. We're attracting something into our lives that's going to be better for us. And that's what this impulse is that's calling us to leave this situation. I think that dispels a lot of the guilt and mistrust in ourselves.
Sabrina.
Yes. So to be completely honest, I've actually never been divorced. I've never been married, but I was in a long-term 13-year relationship, and I can totally relate to what Lisa just said. I had left 2 times prior and went back against my parents' will, against friends and their advice and everything that was being thrown at me that said to not go back. And I wasted another 6 years of my life because of that. And I actually call it ego. I was so determined to prove people wrong, and realized how foolish I would look if I left for a 3rd time. And I wasted so many years. And I knew immediately. I knew within the first year. And me not wanting to look like a fool, me not wanting to look like I couldn't make good decisions, everything Lisa just said is what literally just tore an extra 5 years away from my life. So like 100%.
Can I jump in?
Mm-hmm.
Even okay. I've also, I've been giving this a lot of thought over the prior week. And one of the things that I've realized is that I think, we talk a lot about forgiveness and forgiving other people. And, sometimes depending on what someone's done to you, a lot of people are really resistant to that idea. Completely understand it. That's a different conversation. But the big realization that I've had over the years and like layer by layer is that the biggest person that you need to forgive is yourself. And to forgive yourself for making those decisions, to forgive yourself for not having the strength to walk out the first time, to forgive yourself for going back more than once, and all of those things. You have to learn to love yourself, and it's not an easy thing. I don't want to I think sometimes people listening, if you're in the midst of something and you're listening to people who've been through it, and we throw things around, and it may sound like we're saying it's so easy, snap your fingers and get it done. It's not. It's a process, absolutely. But I do think that self-forgiveness is so important, because if you're constantly trying to push part of yourself away, you're expending so much energy on that. And it's really hard to move forward. And it comes in dribs and drabs. I had a realization this past week that there was something I hadn't forgiven myself for from decades. It had nothing to do with my marriage, decades old. And once I had that realization, it was really emotional. And I thought, oh my God, I gotta love that kid. It was something from my childhood. I've got to love that kid, because if I can't love her, how am I loving that innocent kid who was totally struggling? I cannot forgive her. How am I forgiving my 54-year-old self for whatever mistakes that I've made? So I think that is really important. And I also think, and this was something else that I really hated to hear people say when I was in the middle of it, it is a choice. And again, it's not like, oh, I'm going to choose to be happy today. I'm going to choose to fix my life. Yay, everything is okay. But it is a choice. Like I had a moment in my marriage when I realized that, like my ex-husband and I realized we weren't happy, and we were kind of at this point where we needed to decide what we're going to do. And I had this realization of, okay, whatever happens, whether my marriage can be saved or not, I have to save myself, because I do not like the person that I'm seeing when I look in the mirror. And she's the most important person here. And so that was the choice. And so the choice was, I'm going to do whatever I have to do so that I can look myself in the eye and love myself and feel like I am the person that I'm meant to be. And so that was a choice. And I made that choice like every day, multiple times a day. And sometimes I failed miserably, and sometimes I didn't. And it's like, you keep making that choice over and over again. And when you screw up, you forgive yourself and you just get up and do it again tomorrow. And so I think like, if you when you think about like and I also made a choice when I went through my divorce, I am not going to let this is not going to define my life. I'm not going to be bitter. I'm not going to be angry. It's not going to stop me from, loving again, from enjoying my life, and whatever the hell I have to do to get there, I'm going to do. So if I have to go to therapy, if I have to go to coach, whatever I have to do, if I have to have an exorcism, whatever it is, I'm going to do it. So I think you got to just keep choosing yourself again and again and again.
Absolutely. Okay.
Sharm. Oh, we can't. You're.
Maybe, is this better?
Yes.
Without it? Okay. And it's not working. I can hear you guys all good. I lost my train of thought. The fear, like having realizing what the fear is that's keeping you in that situation, and then breaking it down into small steps. And that's what helped me, was just to take that first small step, and then the next step would show up, and then and you're moving forward with just small steps, but you see the light at the end of the tunnel with each step forward.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. All right. Any more on that topic? No, we're good. All right. We're moving on to Lisa.
Hi, y'all. Good morning. So, okay, we introduce ourselves and we ask some questions, right? So I'm Lisa McCourt. I have an online joy school. Do you guys hear a weird echo thing?
It's Sharmon. Can you put your ear things back in, Sharmon?
Okay.
I have an online joy school. I've been a joy trainer for 20 years. Basically, that just means I teach tools of vibration elevation. So, twice divorced, happily married to the love of my life. My second divorce was pretty unique in that I was able to create exactly the divorce situation that I wanted, and we're still very good friends, and he's here all the time, and it's all worked out really well. Wow. So that's my perspective. I help a lot of my clients through this situation. And my question for y'all, my top question, I had a few, was I often come across people who tell me, I can't get divorced because of the kids. I want to wait till the kids are older. It's not right for the kids. And we all know, right, that they're these like little energetic sponges. And when I try to explain that, I hear, oh, but they never hear us review. They have no idea there's anything wrong with our marriage. Well, they're creating their whole definition of what a marriage is around what they're energetically absorbing. So how have y'all dealt with that, or do you deal with that with your clients? Marie.
I definitely went through that with my child. It was about 6 years that, I went through that with my ex, where he told me that he cheated on me. And I went through a forgiveness process. And then I stayed with him for 6 years after that. And when I went to my son to have that discussion with him about, things were going to change, he said, "Good for you, Mom."
Wow.
He's like, "You guys are toxic for each other, and I'm really glad that you're taking that step forward."
So did that make you sort of think twice about the time that had gone by while you thought you were doing what's best for your child?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the people are just resistant to recognizing that they might be doing more damage by staying than leaving. And I don't know if sometimes it's an excuse because of the fears that Christine addressed, and we've all, talked about. There are a lot of other fears that go hand in hand with that. But certainly I assume we all agree here that this is not a favor for the child. So I didn't know if any of you wanted to speak to that. Yeah, Torie.
So I was actually pretty lucky with my divorce. We had some issues prior to the pregnancy, and I was sick, and they told me it was my last chance to get pregnant. And we were kind of in a good place. And so throughout that pregnancy and then after the pregnancy, we were not in a good place. And so I was really lucky in that my ex-husband and I agreed. And we were just like, this is not what we want to show our kid that a marriage looks like, that a healthy relationship looks like. And so, I think we all saw role models growing up of what healthy relationships looked like. And then when it was time to build our own, we had a hard time with it because, all the role models, like nobody's perfect. All the relationships that we saw had flaws in them. And so the relationships that we built had flaws in them. And so I think that was like a huge driving factor in the divorce that I had for my ex-husband and I both, was that we need to build a better world for our kid. And so he was our top priority in getting the divorce.
Wow.
As it should be. That's beautiful.
Wow. Actually.
Yeah. Sabrina, then Amy.
So I actually have a question to add on to that question. Is there anyone here who, like when their parents got divorced or didn't get divorced, had feelings? Does anyone come from that background? I don't know.
Sharmon, and Amy, I know you want to talk.
My parents had a toxic relationship my whole childhood, and I just remember me and my brother like sometimes hiding in the closet and just spending a lot of time wishing our parents would get divorced. And then when we were 15 and 17, my mom finally got the courage to, because she dealt with the same fears we all have, and she got the courage to finally leave my dad. And it took like two times within probably a 12-month period of leaving, going back, and then she got the strength. And we just totally supported her. We were like, we told her like that we've been wishing for this, our whole childhood, that this is the best thing for you. And watching mom be strong and stuff it helped me when it came time to make those decisions too, to remember to see how I felt as a child going through that with my parents, that in the long run, my kids would benefit.
I second that story. Yes, me too. What Sharmon said for me. Yes. Now.
Okay, I was just going to say, in regards to like your first, the question, how do people who say they want to stick in it for the kids and it's better for the kids and we'll wait until they go, whatever, just look at it from the perspective. And I'm not divorced. I've been married for 26 years, but I have a 26-year-old daughter, and I would never want to give her an example of, you need to stay in this bad toxic place because for your kids to experience the same bad toxic place, right? And so if you're choosing to stay in that relationship, like that's the example, and more is caught than is taught. And like I can tell my kids like all the things, right, but they look to me as an example, and the things that I do, that's going to speak to them more than anything else. And so if you're in a situation where you're staying in that toxic relationship, you got to look at that and say, like, do I want my son or my daughter to stay in this? Like, is that what I want for them? Is that the advice that I would give them? Wow. And I think that as a parent, that really changes your perspective, because I would never give my child that advice to stay in a toxic place where they're hurt mentally, physically, whatever. And so I just think that that's something that parents should consider when they're saying that they think they're doing it for the kids. So this is what you want for your kids. And I don't think anyone wants that.
I absolutely love more is caught than is taught. I'm so going to use that. That's a really catchy way to express that. And it's so true. And I don't think it even has to be an entirely toxic situation. I just think we have to be cognizant that whatever we're modeling, that's what we're telling our children, that this is the best I can hope for you, because this is what you're absorbing as your definition of marriage. And sometimes it's not even entirely toxic. It's just something we recognize we don't want to be modeling for our children. Christine?
Yeah, so I grew up in a situation like that. My parents, I grew up thinking till I was about 15 that I had the perfect family, and but I was also a very, I guess, I don't know if I would use the word empath, but I'm definitely a sensitive person. And I think as a child, I absorbed a lot of the emotions that were going on. But I thought that I thought it was me. I thought there was something wrong with me because everyone was happy. So like, what was going on with me? And so I was the stereotypical oldest child, like super responsible, don't rock the boat, like stay quiet, don't cause trouble. And that I'm still undoing that. And that, and not to say like my parents did the best they could. They thought that that they were doing the right thing. I don't fault them, because that was just where they were at the time, and I didn't always feel that way, so that's another, like, that took some time. But so when it was my turn, I think I struggled with all of those things, and then I finally got to a point where I just thought, like, I am not one, I don't want to, this is not the relationship I want to model for my children. I want them to know that they are worthy of an amazing relationship. I am worthy of an amazing relationship. And I also felt like I was carrying so much emotional, like heavy emotions, that I was not the best mother that I could be for my children. And so that was a really big thing. That was really one of the tipping points, I think, was like, I am not the parent. And their dad it was the same thing. Like, we were both unhappy. So you cannot be the best parent when you are carrying so much emotional weight. So that was something that was another factor for me.
That's beautifully shared. Yeah. And we think, oh, if the kids think it's a good marriage, then we're good. And that's actually worse. If they think it's a good marriage, but they're absorbing, we're doing even more damage than if we just tell them this is a bad marriage. Leann, what you got, girl?
Just kind of coming off of what Christine was saying about carrying the emotional weight. So when I was growing up, my mother carried the emotional weight of everything. Many of us experienced that. So what I had recognized in my marriage is the weight of carrying the emotion of the marriage, of being the dominant parent, was too much. And that's where I started to break down, and I just couldn't take on anymore. I couldn't support emotionally my husband, my now ex-husband, because it was wearing too many hats. And so when I grew up, my mother did that to a fault, where everything was smoothed over, and I had a great childhood. My parents actually do have a great relationship. And actually, me going through my divorce had brought them even closer, because all of the fears and all of the dynamics that they were living, my mother finally had a voice on that. And it wasn't bad, it wasn't toxic, but it was just their dynamic. And so I recognized, and I was highly supported by my parents in going through this divorce, which was surprising to me because of how they had, lived. But I didn't realize, again, with raising my kids, or, with my children, that, we never think that they hear everything and see everything, but they recognize the dynamic that we used to fight a lot. And it was so much my day to day. And it wasn't toxic. It was just the level of speaking to each other was heightened all the time. We didn't even realize it was like that. So, just understanding and like, I was hit my wall, really. I couldn't do it anymore. And then the person that I had chosen to be with did not have the capacity to show up that way because they never had to. You know, I was the emotional support. His mother was the emotional support, and there was layers there that he could lean into. So when I had to step back and say, I can't do it anymore. So it wasn't as smooth as, say, Torie or somebody else, or Christine, of unraveling that, because it was also the dynamic of somebody, my ex-husband, having to emotionally be responsible for themselves. And so that dynamic was very, I would say, rough.
And that level of awareness is what's needed to get you through it. And it's hard to have that level of awareness when we're in the thick of it. So, I'm sure that's something that you can help people who come to you for that kind of assistance and letting them see that. Beautiful. Thank you.
All right. I think we're going to move on to Sharmon.
So, I'm the mother of 5, ages, the youngest is 16 to 28, and own my own child care service business and help raise children by being a nanny, work with families closely, which I love. And my question is, through one of the things that really one of the issues that I dealt with at my divorce was that, like, my childhood pastor, like the church that I was raised in and everything, and the childhood pastor was like, told me that if I go through with the divorce, like, they wouldn't really accept that there was emotional abuse or anything. We did the counseling or whatever. And then basically told me, if I go through the divorce, I'm taking a long walk off a short bridge. So I felt like betrayed by my spiritual leader, and that if I'm to save myself and my children, which, I knew was the right thing to do, I was basically like choosing to lose out on heaven. It was a huge thing. So I was wondering if anybody else had to face that choice, and you still went through with it. And then, and the positive part is I found that's not the case. Like, I don't feel that I made that choice and now I'm going to hell, because I got divorced or anything like that. That's not true. It's a lie that I think that you're either raised with it or, and you just come face to face with it, and you have to. And my mom was the same way. She stayed with my dad for so long because of that. And in her mind, she thought she was choosing to give up on her beliefs. Sabrina?
So I don't have personal experience on this, but I run across this all the time. I was born and raised as a Jehovah's Witness. So, individuals that I associate with often come to me with stories just like this, where, Jehovah's Witnesses shun. It's not just like you're not getting, but they also shun you here on earth. So if a divorce does happen and you do decide to go out into the world and intermingle with the opposite sex, under the church, you're still considered married. So as long as you divorce and then never get into another relationship ever again, then you're, kind of okay. But that's not realistic. So the moment that you decide to, go together with another person, the action of disfellowshipping happens, where your entire family and your entire congregation, your entire religion totally disassociates from you and cuts off all communication. So not only are you taking away your, everlasting eternity of goodness that people believe in, but you're also shunned here on the earth, on our earthly bodies too here. So it's very heavy. And I see so many individuals who are living in violent relationships even sometimes, in order to cling on to their family and their friends and everything that they have ever known. And it's very frustrating seeing the manipulation that goes on in that realm, and trying to break that down, explain that, and make it okay for them to release everything. Because when you're in that situation, that's basically what you have to do. You have to be okay with losing everything, all of your relationships, when you break that one relationship. So it's super, super heavy.
Amy?
Well, as a Christian person, I just want to apologize to anybody who's ever been treated like that by your church family, a pastor, anybody like that. And I would just say that if you know somebody who's in that situation, or they're kind of contemplating that, or they're being shunned by family or church family because you think of divorce or divorce is wrong or whatever, if they're a church-going person, they'll know the Bible, and I would just refer them to the story of the woman at the well, because that was a woman who was going to the well at a time of day when no one else went, because she was being shunned by her community. No one else would even go to the well with her. She had to go in the heat of the day, and that's where Jesus met her, and he sent her on. She was divorced and living quite a wild life, if you read the story, and that's completely who he connected with, and that's completely who he sent to go do his work. And so I would just refer a Christian person who's in that struggle or in that story of but I don't want to, I think it's wrong, or I can't be accepted, or I'm failing God if I do this. I would just refer her to the story of the woman at the well.
Good. Lisa?
Hi, yeah, I don't have a religious experience, but my 99-year-old Southern Baptist grandmother is very, very dear to me. She's one of my best friends. When I did get divorced from my second husband, who I had my children with, she was extremely upset. From the moment I told her, she started calling my then husband saying, we can't let this happen. What can we do to prevent this from happening? And he also didn't want it to happen. So that actually delayed me by years, knowing how much she felt that I was just doing a horrible thing to my children and a horrible thing to my family. And I just wanted to say that I relate to that. And it can be just from other sources even than religion. I think religion was where she was coming from, very well intentioned. And it took a while to, I just kept explaining to her that her filter isn't my filter. Her keyhole that she sees the universe from is a different keyhole. And, I had to come to terms with it with her before I could leave.
Go ahead, Leann.
Yes. I think this is such a great discussion because, we're all sitting here defying the odds of what we were taught as children, to be good women or good girls, to get married. Marriage, the value of marriage was over independence and potentially, career and individualized, paths. And I think a lot of what I know I've experienced is unraveling those ideas and those morals that were put upon me by my family, by what they were taught. And, whether you are, church going, you're religious, I changed my religion. I grew up Southern Baptist. I converted to Judaism. So I've explored a lot of different things in my life. But the moral of all of it is, walk the good path. Well, we don't really get to choose that at a certain, as a child or when we're younger, when we're being groomed to be amazing women. I know that I have friends that weren't groomed to necessarily just get married. They were groomed to, what do you want? What do you, what are your interests? What do you want to be when you grow up, besides being a mother, besides being a wife, besides being all those things? And I'm in my 40s, so I'm of a generation that, that was still important. It's to get married, and that value set and that value system legitimizes you as a female. And just sort of unraveling all of that stuff, whether you're, going to church or you're going, to temple or synagogue or, Kabbalah, whatever it is, still finding your path and your voice, but it all does come back to trusting yourself, believing in yourself, and listening to what that voice is behind it. You can still be an amazing mom. You can still be an amazing co-parent. You can still be a very dominant career woman if you want to be, and go to church and listen to all those things. But we tend to have to choose sometimes. And especially, I know just in my life, I've lived a very non-traditional life. I was a model for 25 years. I traveled all over the world starting very young. So I was very non-traditional in going to school and becoming all those things. So that was sort of a struggle and a fight that happened very early on, that a lot of people don't even go through until they go to college and they're in their 20s and they've fallen in love and they want to get married and, and I want to have kids and I want to do this. So, I really encourage women to, I actually speak with a lot of millennials right now, and they are living a life and living very differently than I was taught and that I thought about, but they still wrestle with that, right? Well, I want to be this, but I want to have a family. And so it's sort of that ongoing thing. So I definitely encourage people to, step outside, trust themselves, and, still have your religion, still, believe in the things that, morally really stick with you, and lean into that when you do need it. But just know that that's not the only way. And just because someone says something to you, it doesn't mean that, that you can't challenge it. And I think that's one of the things that I realized when I moved from Christianity to Judaism is I felt that I could question what God was saying. I could question and not be a sinner and not be bad. And so that that was something that I found very freeing. And I think that was the beginning of me really trusting my own self, that there wasn't a judgment actually happening, that I was the only judge of that. So, yeah.
I just wanted to piggyback onto that, just in terms of, I think it's because, I've always considered myself a feminist, but I think as I've gotten older, in some ways that's become, I think, hopefully less obnoxious, but more ingrained. Like when I was in my 20s, it was just, you couldn't have a conversation with me without me like shoving it down your throat. But now I don't think I'm like that. But I do think that, especially as women, we are conditioned to, be the good girl, which I hate that term, because I think it's toxic. And it's that, like, you do what's expected, and even if you are a career woman, like, all you have to do is look at the statistics of women that are high-powered women. They're still carrying the weight of all of the, like, the parenting responsibilities, the cleaning responsibilities, all of that. And so it's something that it's in the water. And we've been socialized. And so when you're thinking about a divorce, it's harder as a woman. I think there's less support. So I think for all of us, it's really important that we support each other's choices, even if we don't have to agree with everything. We don't have to understand everything. But I think we need to support any woman who's trying to follow her path, whatever that is, and just reinforce to each other that we are sort of the queens of our own destiny, and we get to decide what works for us, and it's nobody else's decision.
Yep. Yeah.
100%. I agree with all of that. I would like to hear from Miss Amy Butler.
Thank you, Sabrina.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna just I've got a couple questions, but what Christine just said leads into one of them. Like she said, we all have different opinions. Some of us are super strongly opinionated. Some of us don't even know what our opinions are because we've been listening to other people. But how do you give wise counsel? Because I want to be wise counsel to my kids. I want to be wise counsel to friends. And when friends are in a marriage that's struggling, or when they're going through a divorce, or after they're recently divorced, I want to be able to give them wise counsel in those conversations without just portraying, okay, well, this is what's good for me, so I know that this is what's good for you. and to take like myself out of it, but to really listen to where they are and give the advice that's appropriate for them. Because I know so many acquaintances that because they've been divorced, they hate men and marriage is bad, especially if they're recently divorced. And so if then you're a married person having a problem, if you talk to them, you need a divorce too. The whole world needs a divorce. And then the other people, which you guys have probably experienced, you know, like Leann said, I think it was Leann, she couldn't talk to her network about her divorce that she was going through because they couldn't relate. So how do you take yourself out of it and give wise counsel to those people around you? Okay, Torie.
Okay. I think Leann and I tied.
Yeah, you're it.
So I think with that, the thing that I always come back to when I'm talking to people is there is safety in whatever choice they choose. I feel like when people come to me, they want me to make the decision for them. And so if I just say to them, like, you can't make a wrong move, like you can't make a mistake that will change everything forever. Like you are going to take the next step. If it turns into a path that you don't like, you have the option to get out of it. So it's like just giving that freedom of like, you can't make a mistake. It is impossible to make a mistake. It's all going to work out one way or the other. Then that gives them the freedom to actually choose the thing that they want to choose, but they're trying to get other people to tell them is a good or bad idea. Yeah. So that's, yeah.
And sometimes people are looking for permission. You know, they're looking for that permission to do. And sometimes, not even like I'm not divorced, but in other decisions, I'll find myself, I need to find enough people who say that this is okay. So that when I do it, you said it was a good idea too.
Yeah. I think Brene Brown calls it polling. Like when she's insecure about a decision, she'll like poll everybody. Like, yeah.
And I keep polling until I get the answer I want. And then
That's
okay,
great.
Leann, did you have your hand raised?
I did. I think that Torie, what you said is right on. But for me as well is actually holding space and listening to what that person is actually saying, so that I can then identify what their biggest fear is, and then saying to them, "You're just scared of XYZ," and then taking that next step is going to change things. So a lot of people are scared of the change. They're scared of any change happening. They want to keep everything as easy as possible, but that there is change going to happen. So if someone, comes to me or I'm coaching someone and they're like, I don't want to make the decision. What's the fear behind that? Is it that it will change, or is it the work that you think is going to come after? Because all of that is going to happen. So you can either stay where you are and accept what is happening, or you make the decision to make a change. Those are for me, those are the two things, either acceptance or making the decision to change.
And you brought up a good point about like doing the work, right? Because whether you do the work after or you do the work before, what I have found in my friends that are divorced is that there's work that needs to be done within both of those people that were involved in that relationship. And if they don't do that work, they're taking all that baggage into the next relationship. So I think there's value in taking a look at doing the work. You can't make the other person do the work, but there's value in taking a look at doing the work while you're in the relationship instead of going and just like starting all over again with someone else. If the other person's willing to do work. Sometimes they're not. And sometimes it's, I know people who, and close to me who've been married, and they can do all the work they want to do, and they're not compatible. It's not the right place to be, right?
Yep.
But I think that answer is different for everybody. Okay, so Sabrina had her hand raised, and then
I would like to just actually see if anyone had anything to add to Purat, who's commenting.
So I agree with like the envisioning of the life you can build, and to think about like one of the things that I've learned as a coach is that a lot of what we think are facts are actually our thoughts. And so there are, we have to really break down like what's the fact and what is our thought. So like I'm getting divorced, that's a fact, right? But your thought about it is it's going to ruin my life. nobody's ever going to talk to me. I will never find love again. Someone else could have the thought of like, this is the best thing that I could possibly be doing. It is the beginning of the rest of my incredible life. And the way that you approach those thoughts is going to impact how you're feeling, and then the actions that you take, and then the results that you get. So if you have an idea of like, if you're envisioning that life that you want, and you think like, if I want to have, you know, the life that I envision for myself is a marriage that's a partnership that is, you know, where I feel seen and heard, where I see and hear my partner, where, you know, whatever it is, like, well, what are the thoughts and beliefs that I'm going to need to get me to that place? And maybe I don't, you know, like, so then if you can at least identify them or start to identify them, then you can begin to work towards those thoughts. You may not have them right now, and it may be a, you know, step-by-step process. I mean, that's one of the reasons that I love tapping, because it helps drill down in the body to figuring out like what are those limiting beliefs that you have, because we all have them, and then processing them so that you can let them go. But I think really, like, you know, my advice to people is like, let's look at what you're thinking, and is it true? Because half the time it's not true. No, it's not true that if you go through a divorce, it's going to ruin your life. It's not true that, you know, if you are divorced and your ex-husband is just a complete and utter jerk, that he's like the ball and chain that you're going to carry around with you forever. You can make choices so that he's not constantly influencing your life forever. Like, you got to look at, you know, what are the facts and what are your thoughts about those facts, and how can you shift your thoughts? That's the only thing you can control. You can't control what's happening to you. You can only control how you react to them. And so you have to be really aware of your thoughts and your feelings, and whether they're serving you. And if they're not serving you, then you need to make different choices. And nobody can, you know, like, I may decide that, you know, I may have a thought and I decide that it serves me because it is aligned with my beliefs. Someone else might look at that thought and be like, no way, that is not a thought that I want to cultivate. Okay, that's fine, because that's my path and it's not yours. That's great. You just have to figure out what yours is.
Okay, Leann.
Yes, I wanted back to Perrette, whatever, you know, what Christine was really talking about with the thoughts. It's huge. And it's also identifying, if you want to envision a new life and build a new life, that you actually believe that it's possible. So you can have all of these thoughts and you can have all of these dreams, and you can say, oh, one day I want this, or one day I want that, but you have to really dig deep and support yourself that it's an actual possibility to create that, because that's the difference. Just like Christine was saying, I really lean into thoughts and how we act from our thoughts. We act from our thoughts. If they're unintentional thoughts, then, you know, we're not aware of what we're doing. If they're intentional thoughts, then we are aware of what we're doing, but we're acting from all of it. So if we start to really create that, get very clear on what you want to envision, and then realize that it is a possibility, and then what are the next steps to get me there? I think that's a great comment. Thank you, Perrette, so much. I hope we were.
Christine, did you have something to add on that comment?
Oh yeah.
I'm just like, yes. Everything Leann said.
Everyone's name disappears when the comment is up there, and so I'm trying to remember. Elisa, you're the one.
Yeah, it was me. I love everything that everyone's saying. So juicy. The one thing I would add, to go back to your original question, Amy, about, you know, when people come to you, is to pull them out of the victim hole. Because our tendency, if you're the one who wants to get a divorce, you're going to selectively only look for all the reasons that this person is the devil and they are doing this to you and this to you and this to you, because you feel like you need that to shore up your case that you deserve this divorce that you want. But that puts you in this really low energetic state of being a victim to this person. And that's just not a powerful state to go create the divorce that you want and the next life that you want and the next steps. So even in the process of them deciding, it's important to show them, look, you're selectively filtering here. Maybe this person isn't the devil. All that matters is you want something better for yourself. You've recognized that you are worthy of something better than this. That's all that matters. Nothing else matters. You don't need to build up all this evidence. That's enough right there. And that's a much more powerful position to go create that next life.
Taking ownership of that. You know, taking ownership, like if that's what you want, like taking ownership of it instead of being the victim. Because then if you go and you do get the divorce and that doesn't work out great, and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Then like, well, you made me. Well, no, nobody made you do that. But, okay, I have another question if I can.
Yeah.
So if I if I'm friends with both people in the couple and they get divorced, do I have to pick sides? Can I remain friends with both of them? Like, how does that work?
I
Leann.
say yes. You get to maintain, this is also your path in your life. If you like each individual person, you don't get to pick sides. And if the friend has hard feelings about that, they've got to work on some stuff, because it isn't your decision, right? Your decision is to be friends with everyone, and that's what you get to choose. Now, if it's toxic on one side or the other, then obviously, then make a choice. But it's sometimes it's hard to support both if it's a toxic thing. But if it's if it's something that you like both people equally and it's collective, then I would say stay friends with both. I'm just going to give an example. I mean, I have a lot of friends, and we have partners, we have exes, we all get together, we celebrate things together, we do barbecues together. It can be very collective. It does not have to be totally separate. And that is not something that I experienced when I lived or knew of on the East Coast. I moved to the West Coast, and I had all this around me. So it's possible, and it's beautiful. I mean, it really is to be able to have both sides. And then if they're willing to get together and socialize together down the road, it's actually very full.
Torie.
So I think it's really easy for the people in the divorce to only see what the person did instead of seeing that person as a person still. And I know I was definitely guilty of that in my own divorce. Like, I was, pissed off at any family member that was talking to my ex, and he was pretty close with my family. So, it's understandable. I was that person that was very resentful, that anybody would see him as a person and not just what he did. And so I think maybe if somebody had pointed that out to me, I could have gotten over that a lot faster than I did. And, I'm not evolved enough to say that I'm completely over it. Like, I still get a twinge, even if people ask me about him. But we're good now. And he is a person who is deserving of friends. And I hope the best for him. Like, I really want him to have those connections still. And so maybe bringing that up to somebody who is mad at you for staying friends with both, and just being like, you are not in a place right now where you can see this person as a person and not just what they did. But I am. Like, they are still a person to me and not just what they've done.
I appreciate the honesty. Sabrina.
I want to add on to what Torie said and kind of dig in a little deeper on that since we're here. So it's all fine and dandy to say to somebody, yeah, looking back now, everything's fine. I made that mistake in the past, but I'm telling you now that don't do that. Is there a good amount of time where a person is allowed to be angry or upset or pissed or have those feelings that Torie was saying? What is a good amount of time? Are they bad for having those feelings? Because those are bound to bubble up. So what's the solution when you're in it? You're listening to someone like Torie and you're just like, whatever, girl, like, you don't even understand. What's the advice like to someone who's in the mud right now?
You have to have your emotions. You have to go through the feeling of all of it. You can't, if you push it away, you're seeing Christine and you're getting that emotion, tapping into it. So our bodies just hold on to emotion and they don't go away. If you go, I'm really mad, but I'm going to just let that go. You don't let it go. It's energy. If there's energy there and your body stores it and it sits with you. So it might not come out right now. 3 months from now, when your 3-year-old throws spaghetti on the wall, you're losing your mind because that is triggering something. So I always say, feel what you're feeling. You get to decide how long that is. You know, it could be a day, it could be a week, but the longer it goes on, you're attaching yourself to that, and that's your emotional vehicle. So then you need to start evaluating and not living in that victim and living in that mindset of it. If it goes on too long, and we can say a week, we can say a month, or we can say 2 days. I mean, it's all very specific to each person. But you have to have those feelings and emotions. You got to be angry. You can be angry at yourself. You can be angry at your ex. You can be angry at everything. You can be sad. You have to go through those stages and feel them. Feel it. The grief that comes towards the end. The forgiveness that you have to give yourself. The feeling of a failure. The feeling of all of those things. Those are all real, and you should have them. You get to decide how long that is, and that's where support and help really comes in, or being coached to say, you know, are you still really angry, or are you just scared now that you have to make another decision? So they get kind of blended, but definitely feeling them.
Yeah, I always say you got to feel them to heal them. And I think that, again, also thinking about the thoughts that go with them, because your thoughts create your feelings. So if you are, you know, and I really love to do like a thought download where you just, and Julia Cameron, who wrote The Artist's Way, has something she calls the morning pages, where you do it when you get up in the morning. I will confess that I don't get to do that all the time, but I don't know that, I think it's great if you can do it in the morning, but you can do it anytime. Just like take 15 minutes and write stream of consciousness about whatever it is that you're thinking and feeling, and then kind of dissect them. Because if you are in this victim mode of, thanks, Lucy. If you're in this victim mode of like, you know, it was such a traumatic experience and it's going to be with me forever, that is not going to serve you. You certainly want to acknowledge whatever the trauma is and what the emotions are. Absolutely. You can't paper over those, but you need to feel them. And then you need to start to think about like, how can I think about this in a different way? Like, you know, this was really traumatic, you know, like my divorce, and your thought might be, it was traumatic, it's going to be with me for the rest of my life. Or you could start to think about, I start to think about it as, this experience has taught me so much about my inner strength and resilience. And maybe you don't totally believe that yet, but so you keep working on it, and you got to feel it in your body, and you got to tap it out. And, you know, you have to go through it's work, but you start to move yourself forward, because I totally agree with Leann that everyone is on their own time clock, and nobody can tell you how long you grieve, but you also need to recognize that when it starts to get in the way of you moving forward with your life, then that's when you need to think about, I need to find support for this. I need someone to help me process this so that I can start to let it go.
Sabrina.
Is there anyone that can touch on, so this is like, this topic specifically is bringing up like a lot of emotion within me, because one of the things that I dealt with a lot was playing the victim role. I played the victim for years and years and years, and I almost saw myself as a woe is me angel that like was enduring all of this stuff, and look at how strong and patient I am because of all of these things that have happened to me. And I was wondering if there's anyone on here that can speak on identity, because that's kind of what we're talking about here is, you know, how to go from being angry and mad and frustrated to like not. Because I did want to, you know, kind of like cocoon myself into this story of being this person who went through this and kind of like held on to that identity for a really long time, almost to the point where anyone who knew me during the last like 2 years I was in that relationship, and then the year after I was in that relationship, the first thing that would come out of my mouth is, what was going on. It was like, hello, my name is Sabrina, nice to meet you, blah. And now looking back, it's embarrassing. But I'd like to kind of touch, if there's anyone here that's comfortable, on identity and what that is and why we cling on to stuff like that, and how to change that, because we're hanging on to it so tight. And that's why it's tough. Is there anyone that can touch on that?
I will. Okay. I was about to talk about it, so I'm so glad that you opened that door. I think one of the first things that I do with clients when I see that they're in that space is have them make a list of the payoffs of the state that they're in. You're staying in this state because it's familiar. We as humans cling to the familiar more than we're drawn to create a better situation. That's just human nature. So let's look at all the payoffs we're getting for being the victim. We get all this love and support from our friends. And then, you can choose to stay in that state. If you're like, let's look at all these payoffs. Wow, that's a lot of payoffs. Do you want to stay there? Because look at all that you're getting. And then you let them come to the conclusion that, but no, I'm really unhappy. Oh, you're unhappy. Then why wouldn't we let this person off the hook? Because we think that we're doing it for them. But of course, it's really for us. It's like, it's not about forgiving them, condoning anything. It's because we've noticed that carrying this is dragging down our energy, our vibration. And if we can see it from their angle, if we can walk around the statue to see the different sides of the statue, if we can make them kind of, okay, they were operating from their keyhole. We all see reality through a keyhole. They're operating from their keyhole. We're operating from ours. And then feel the lightness of that and feel how much better it makes us feel. You don't have to ever tell them they're forgiven or off the hook, but when you show somebody that it's more to their benefit to look at this from a different perspective, I think that goes a long way.
Marie, I think you raised your hand.
Yeah, I was stuck in victim mode for a really long time. I would constantly have panic attacks, just stuck in that woe is me attitude. And it wasn't until somebody brought up energy and being extra sensitive, which was like 2 years after my divorce, that, what I was attracting was because of the way I was feeling. And that just like had a light bulb moment for me. And I was just like, I need to change. Like, and figure out like what the root cause was for me and why I was acting the way I was, and that it was up to me and only me. Like no one else was going to do it for me. Like I was constantly reaching out to other people to do it for me, but you can't do that. Somebody can't just change your mind for you. You have to do it yourself. It's work, and you have to do it. You have to go within. You have to change it yourself.
And I did one more thing. I completely agree with what Marie was saying, and I think that a lot of the time people are afraid to do the work. It's like the evil you know is safer than the evil that you don't know, even though we're in excruciating pain. But I also find that a lot of the time it goes back to some core limiting belief that we have adopted during childhood, whether it's like, some idea of, well, I'm just never going to be happy because I'm so sensitive and, people always take advantage of me and this is just the way it is. It may not be a conscious belief, but it's somewhere in your body, in your mind. And so, and often it's layered because you have that belief, like maybe something happened when you were 5 and then something else happened when you were 7 and sort of layered onto that. So you've got years of this belief and it's become part of who you are. And so letting go of that is really scary. Like this is my identity. I don't know who I am if I'm not this person. And so when you can dig deep into that, and it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be like that it doesn't have to take years to realize what those beliefs are and to let them go. But I think that that's really important too, because we are, it's safety. Our brain wants us to be safe, and what we know is what's safe. That what's out there is scary. And so your brain is going to do everything it can to keep you in that same place. So the more aware you are of what you're believing and what's driving you, the easier it is to move forward. And it's not necessarily easy, but at least it allows you the possibility of moving forward and doing the work.
Leann.
I was also, yes, I was going to say, being stuck in victimhood, it is also a vehicle for acknowledgement. So that's one of the things that, you identify with and becoming a martyr. Like, look at all the things that I'm doing so that, so I can be seen, so I can be heard. I didn't fall into victimhood, but I fell into martyrdom, where I'm doing all of these things. Do you see what I'm doing? Do you see what I'm doing? Being a mom, being a this, being a that. And so I think for me, kind of parlaying what Christine is saying, is it was my vehicle for acknowledgement, for being heard, and being, gaining attention, gaining, holding space in the floor, and like, here's all the things that I'm doing. But I also think victimhood, and I see this going around all the time on social media, and like, oh my God, I'm my mom and I'm so tired, my kid's like crazy. And, there's this just low energy vibration that I think a lot of females connect on this level. And it's like, they then support each other in this, life is hard, life is a struggle, call it victimhood or whatever. And it's like an identity that you kind of get stuck in. And I'm not in that space, but I see it and I recognize it. But I also think it's about, women not being, what's the word I'm trying to look for? It's like, you want to be humble, but they almost don't want to celebrate each other, because, let's just stay in the little wading pool here, and let's just talk about all the bad stuff that's going on in our lives, and we can connect that way, and not say, oh, but you're amazing because of this reason. So I think, just recognizing that you don't have to stay in that space. You can support each other in a different way. It's a decision and it's a choice to move out of that. Yes, Marianne says, I agree. I have friends like that. Yeah, it's like, oh, come on, let's saddle up to the bar, so to speak, and talk about our issues and our problems. I mean, it's what we do as humans anyway. We socialize, we talk about, we try to figure out, but when does it become just kind of a pool of low energy, and when is it actual support? That's when you have to kind of look at the difference. So Sabrina, if you were in victimhood, you had people around you that were supporting that constantly in that space, and it was safe. Like Christine was saying, it is safe. It's what that's why people stay in that place, because the unknown is more uncertain and it's more work, and your brain doesn't think about that. Brain's like, oh, I can handle this. This is something that I'm used to. I know the pattern, I know the cycle, and I'm going to stick with it because I can handle it. You might not like it, but you can handle it because you've done it. So just recognizing that. Yeah, Marie.
This reminds me of the video that's going around where it's talking about an empath, and the person goes over to someone and they hold hands, and their hands become black. And then they go and they hug someone who's trying to kill themselves. And then the more black comes into them. It's just like emptying their cup. Like, and then eventually it's all black, and you're just in victimhood, and you didn't even put yourself there. Like, it was just an energy exchange that you've just accepted as your own. And I've definitely done that. I've definitely been where I've just given away my energy to the point that I just accepted that as my reality.
Yeah.
100%.
Yes.
All right. Oh, go ahead, Sharmon.
Mine wasn't so much my identity. I think growing up was like, or in my life before was like being the good girl, like being the good mom, caring really how everybody saw me, you know, my in-laws and having that reputation. And so then by stepping, you know, getting divorced and recognizing that I was unhappy and all that was like letting that go, letting that image go, that identity go. Because I was going to be the bad guy. I was going to be seen as the bad guy by initiating the divorce and taking this other path that was in the long run better for me. But I had to come to that step off, you know, let go of that identity and come to the place where that doesn't matter. You know, I can't stay here because I care about like what everybody's going to think about me, that see me as not being good.
I just want to add something on the beginning part. You know, I get to decide who I want to be. And in any situation, I get to decide that. And am I, you know, and I have relationships that are not always pleasant, and they're people that I have to deal with that sometimes it seems like it's toxic, or I can have that like, woe is me, like, well, can you even believe that they did this? And like, where do they think they're coming? You know, like this whole thing. But then I have to choose, you know, how am I going to, like, who am I, first of all, like centrally, who am I? And then how does that person respond, right? Because I'm a person of integrity. I want to be a person who's filled with joy. I want to be this person I'm who I am, regardless of what any of you guys say, or regardless of what any of my family does, or what happens to me. I choose how I'm going to respond. And I have to sometimes take a step back because I don't want to react to what somebody else does to me. And I definitely don't want to be defined by what somebody else does to me or what somebody else says about me. And, you know, for me, you know, in my faith background and going back to, you know, like Leann said about questioning God, you know, when you're going through like the midst of something terrible that kind of rocks your identity, you know, crying out to him and saying like, who are you? Because, you know, like, you're my creator, you created me, like, you get to like call me by name, you get to define me, and who do you say I am, and how do I live that out, versus what does, you know, Sally Joe over there down the street say about my Facebook post? You know, like, whatever it is. Sometimes it's little and sometimes it's big, but at the end of the day, I decide who I am. And, you know, I'm a mom, but that's not the definition of me, right? And if something happened to my kids and I lost my kids, if my whole identity is I'm a mom, well, then what happens, right? And same thing like with people who've been through a divorce. If I'm a wife and then that marriage falls apart, well, then what happens? Like, but if you attach your identity to anything external, yeah, your identity is always going to be wavering because that's
Absolutely.
always going to be changing.
Absolutely. Wow, well said. All right. I am looking at Marie.
Hi guys, I am Marie Martin. I'm from West Virginia. I'm a certified Reiki master and a transformation coach. And my question is, we talked a little bit about how our parents felt. And my father didn't speak to me for a year after the divorce. He was very upset with me. It goes back to Sharmon, who was talking about religion. My dad was very upset with me. He thought I was one of the worst sinners ever. I don't know, but so he was. So I just want to know, like, how did all of your parents feel, or how would you have talk to your parents about it?
Leann. I'll go.
Your turn first, yeah.
Yeah. I was very nervous to acknowledge that that I was going to go down this path, and I was fortunate enough that I did have the support of my parents, although it was new for them. They were scared. They didn't know what was happening. They didn't really know how to guide me specifically, but they were there for me. and understanding that this decision was the right decision for me and for the future of my kids too. Not, exercising my ex in any way, but what ended up happening was all of the thoughts that they had over, I mean, we were together almost 20 years, but married like 14. So all the things that they never shared with me along the way started to come out, of how they felt about situations, what they had experienced. And I was like, why didn't you tell me these things? Because it would have helped shape me through the process of being in the marriage. And maybe I could have changed some things and identified and addressed things. But they didn't want to put, be imposing on me. That's your marriage. That's your thing. That's what you're dealing with. And they never shared those things with me. So all of that started to come out during, this time in separation and going through the divorce. And I was really surprised because my family were very open with each other. And I was shocked at how much and how strongly they felt about things. And they never shared that in that amount of time. So although they were supportive, it was sort of also a layer of, I didn't feel betrayed by them, but I felt alone. I was like, oh my God, I've been doing this whole thing by myself, and I have a great relationship with my family. So I was a little surprised. However, supportive, leaning in, and more supportive than I had even anticipated it being. So it did have a great outcome, but a lot of those things surfaced that I was surprised about.
Torie?
My father was actually a pastor for most of my life. He's no longer a pastor. But like, if you know a pastor, he's always going to be a pastor. And we were in an Irish Presbyterian church growing up. So, I mean, women wore skirts and hats to church. And if your head wasn't covered, it was like a whole thing. And so my mom, ever since I can remember, she would always say, she had 6 kids, and she goes, all I can do is pray that, the word divorce is never mentioned in all my generations. Like, that was a very common phrase that she would tell other people. It was very, very well known in our house that, like, you don't get divorced. And so I came out as not a Christian when I was 20, and I didn't end up getting divorced until I was 28. So I had a long time separation from that type of mentality. And so, but I still had that in the background. And, my divorce was a long way coming. And, we would go back and forth between who was divorcing who. And, it wasn't like very, very pleasant. But, it was something that I had a long time to prepare for before, it was time. And so during that time, I did learn a lot about energy and like what you're manifesting and stuff like that. And so what I would do, every time I would worry about it, was I would just picture it going as smoothly as possible. And so when it actually did happen, my ex-husband was being really terrible. And he was saying he was going to take everything, like he was going to take me for everything and leave me with nothing. And he was divorcing me, and I had to move out. And it was like, it was like a climax where it was like, I had to tell my parents because I might have to move in with them. And so in that conversation, I was praying about it, and I was like picturing it, and when you're in that space, it's like, okay, I'm picturing this going really well, but I'm also really scared. And so it was, I called my dad, and it's like in my family, it's best just to talk to my dad and let him talk to my mom. And so I called my dad, and his reaction was, ouch, oh baby, I'm so sorry, like that. And it was like everything just relaxed in me. It was like there was no judgment. There was no hate, anything like that. And he told my mom, which was really good for me because I didn't have to, he got any backlash that there was from that. And my parents were so supportive, like shockingly supportive through the whole thing. And so, yeah, that was how it went for me.
I kind of touched on my story earlier. My family was not supportive. It was horrible. Nobody thought I was making a good decision whatsoever. And then time has borne out that it was a very good decision. And my grandmother, who was the most vocal, is madly in love with my now husband. And if I try to reference how she thought that the divorce was a mistake, it never happened. She never thought it was a mistake. She always knew that's what would be best for me. So it's one of those things that even if it goes horribly, it's time. Time will bear it all out, and holding that vision, like so many have spoken to, is really the most powerful thing that you can do, and not meeting their resistance with your resistance. It's like when they're showing you that they don't like what you're doing and you come back strong with that, it's just going to be such a push pull. I tried to always just, you are so right to have your point of view. I know your point of view is coming from love, and that can be really hard. I have a situation right now. I have a transgender daughter, and my father has disowned our family because we support her. And, it's been a year and a half that my father has completely disowned our family, and I won't let anyone in my family badmouth him about it. He thinks he's coming from a place of love. That's crazy for me to imagine. But the more that we can, share that with the people around us and our kids, that like everyone's just doing what they have, that they're dealing with from their own experiences and beliefs that have created their filter that they view the world through. And I think that goes a long way. I'm hoping that by not resisting that situation, that it will, come to a happier conclusion at some point.
Sabrina, we can't hear you.
Anyone else want to respond to Marianne? Yes, no?
Yes. So how did everyone break the news to family? I don't remember it being like one conversation. I feel like similar to Torie, well, maybe Torie wasn't telling her family, but like when it started to sort of unravel, like I immediately called my mom. So my mom is the person to go to, and then she tells my dad. It's a little bit opposite. But I spoke to my mom, and then actually both my parents got on the phone and we had a conversation about it. So it was anticlimactic in that way, that it was, wasn't a huge reaction, but it was like, we're here for you. Let's get through. We're going to get through it together. So that was my experience.
I don't really remember telling my parents. By that point, they were divorced or separated. But the memory that I have, or the feeling that I have, was that everyone was kind of like, oh wow, okay, we were wondering when that was going to happen. And then I had similar experiences to Leann, and that like things started to come out about stuff that had happened over the years that they hadn't shared with me. And so I had the same reaction, like, why didn't you tell me? But if I'm being honest, I think I would have just been really defensive, and I would not have listened to anything that they would have said, because I think a big part of the person that I chose to marry was like, I never went through a rebellion in adolescence, and so I decided to do it in my marriage. Not a good plan for anyone considering it. Not a good plan. So yeah.
Totally hear you on that one. Anybody else want to respond to Marianne?
Oh, go ahead.
Mine, the first divorce, my parents were already divorced, so my dad took his side and like felt like sympathy for him and everything. And I remember that was really hurtful, because it was like, you're my dad, you're supposed to support me no matter what. And so, but I had my mom, who we were super close, and when I could talk to my mom about anything, so she was my rock. And the second divorce, both my parents had passed away, so I was totally on my own. But I had my sister and my brother and like my best friend. So I remember it was really hard to come out because it was a second marriage. I had a lot of shame and I didn't want to go through divorce again. I did not want to admit that I had made a mistake a second time, and I didn't want to admit the situation that I was in. So there was a lot of image. So it came as a shock to everybody when the truth came out, and I took that stand and told them. And then the support and the same thing is like, they were all had stories and like, we knew this and we saw this. And there was that feeling like, well, why didn't you tell me? Like maybe I would have not wasted so many years, like if I had seen some of the things and knew how you felt. But then again, there's also that defensive, like my life is perfect and I don't want anybody else to see otherwise. So for so long, but the support, like when you do take that risk and tell everybody and you get the support, you don't really know what's coming.
Totally.
Yeah.
100%. Marie, do you have anything else? Good.
I also, my son came out as trans as well, like right before the divorce. And so that made my father even more angry. He refuses even now to call him by his name or even recognize that he is trans. So yeah, it's just been a really rough ride with that. And I told my mom first, and she insisted that I tell my father in person, face to face, and that was really not a great idea.
I hear you.
If I had to do it over again, I never would have told him.
Oh,
Wow. Yeah.
but what kind of message would that have sent to your child? I mean, you want to just be supportive of your child 100%.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. We have another question. Does anyone want to read it?
Has anyone ever read the book Mom's House, Dad's House? Best book I've ever read. It relates to how to navigate divorce with kids. I'm actually familiar with that, and I actually coach a lot of people on co-parenting. So I think it's great. I think that, having the mindset that, creating however you want things to be at your place, communicating that with the ex, even if it's tough, it's really for the children. It's for making sure that their transition, they didn't choose divorce. How are we creating safe, loving environments in each place that can, coexist? And so they feel security, they feel love in both places, even if mom and dad aren't getting along. That's really important.
100%. 100%. All right, we're moving on to Torie.
So my name is Torie Brame. I live in Charleston, South Carolina. So a little bit of my background. The reason I went through a divorce was because I got diagnosed with lupus nephritis, SLE, which is just the normal lupus, and then also lupus nephritis. And my ex-husband couldn't handle it. There was a lot of emotional abuse during the time that I was bedridden. And then after we had my son, it was clear that he wanted nothing to do with me. And so after I made the decision that enough was enough, and I was tired of this back and forth of like, oh, we're getting divorced, no, we're not. We're getting divorced, no, we're not. And I was just like, okay, if like I have to leave if he doesn't leave. And I kind of put my foot down, and it was this line in the sand, and of like, this is how I expect to be treated, and if that doesn't happen, this is what it's going to look like for us. And so my question, so when that happened, I got better. I went into remission. And so my question for you guys is, how was your health being in a bad relationship, and how did it change after you got out?
Wow.
I would say my health was my health was always decent, but I was kind of a hypochondriac. I didn't deal with pain very well. I didn't see again, it goes back to that. I didn't see myself as being a strong person. And then when I went through my divorce, I think I started tapping, my anxiety levels went way down, because I was able to manage it. And my whole perception of myself shifted, and so that impacted my health. And so the other two things that happened post divorce was one of my children went through a 2-year illness, and I didn't know if she was going to come out of it. And I was diagnosed with breast cancer at the same time. And if you had told me 4 years before that I would have been able to handle those things by myself, I would have told you there was no way that was going to happen. And I handled both of them. And Marianne, yeah. And I was, with the breast cancer, it was in the middle of my daughter's illness. And so I had no choice but I was just I don't have time for this right now. I have to be there for my child. And so it brought me to radical acceptance right away, and not right away, but way more quickly than I would have gotten on my own. And so I just said, okay, I've been diagnosed with this. I need to know what my options are so that I can make my decisions, so that I can move forward. And so that's what I did. And I got through, and I was very fortunate. I found it myself. So do your exams every month. It was early, and I didn't need chemo, and I didn't need radiation, which thank God, because I really didn't know what I was going to do if I needed that. But so me, the hypochondriac who didn't deal with pain well, I went through I had a double mastectomy, and I didn't take one painkiller. And not because I'm so amazing at pain, I didn't have any pain. And some of that was because of my surgeon, and I know that some of it was me. And I did all of my, thank you, Marianne. I did all of my mindfulness stuff, and I was in that place that I was ready to deal with it. And it absolutely impacted my recovery. The nurses couldn't believe the next day that I had just had the surgery, because I'm not going to say fine, and it's not something I'd wish on anyone. I would never want to go through it again. It sucked, but I got through it. And it would have been a very different situation 4 years earlier if I was in my marriage when I was dealing with all of that.
Oh, I love that. And I'm sure your perspective on your own body was so much better when you went through that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I did before I had my surgery, I went through a whole kind of gratitude thing for my body, and how I had brought 2 lives into the world, and I had fed them, and I had, it was strong, and it was going to get me through. And this very woo-woo thing that I probably, but absolutely 100% believe that it helped me, because again, going back to thoughts and what we manifest and your energy. Yeah, absolutely. And I wouldn't have been in the place to do that, 4 years before, when I was in an unhappy marriage. So it completely, and I've had a couple of other experiences too that have been really challenging, but I've bounced back, either physically or emotionally much quicker than I would have before. So yes, my health is absolutely much better now.
That's amazing.
Marie?
I definitely have a similar story. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia after probably 10 years of being in chronic pain, to the point almost that I was bedridden. I didn't feel like getting out of bed. It hurt to get out of bed. It hurt to walk around. It hurt all the time. And it was just like a dull pain. It wasn't really necessarily even something excruciating, but it was enough that it was depressing. And I was so depressed, and I had such bad anxiety. And it was really because I was unhappy where I was, the environment that I was in. And once I got out of that environment, and once I started to change my mindset and started to really focus on energy and where I was putting it, one day I woke up and I wasn't in pain anymore. And I just, I still get chills like thinking about that day that I woke up and I was fine. And I could get out of bed and I could walk down the street and I was fine. And that's just,
Wow.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
That's amazing. Lisa, did you have something?
No, I was no.
Oh, okay. I'm
It's a
sorry.
personal story about that, but I concur completely that it's all energetic. And once we clear the energy, everything out there, including our health, starts in here. You clean up the interior landscape, you clean up the exterior.
yes.
I didn't have a physical ailment, but I recognized that my nervous system was so taxed. I physically, was a very fit, great in health that way, but my emotional health I was worried. I didn't really have anxiety, debilitating anxiety, but I didn't know that I had anxiety around, dealing with my ex-husband on a daily basis, who was a lot to handle emotionally. And I lived more in a fight or flight from a nervous system perspective. He also lived that way. So it was sort of like by osmosis, like that's just where I would be. And so when I started going through that, it was I felt, and it was definitely energetic, but I felt like this, like calm come over me. I remember it being one day where I would wake up and I would feel great. Not that and I was like, wow, I didn't realize I ever felt bad, or just the anticipation of what that day was going to be like. And again, it wasn't terrible, but it was just, there was that level of anxiety, or just, I didn't know what to expect on a daily basis. And then when I was just me waking up on my own, it was much easier. I still didn't know what to expect from him, coming from, going through the divorce, but it wasn't physically in my space. I could control that. And so I think that's been the difference too, is that I'm much more, I very much lean into, meditation and mindfulness and listening to my body. I don't work out the same way. I'm much more gentler to my body. I'm not as intense with it. And I feel better. So.
I love that. Sharmon?
I agree with Leann. I didn't have any like a physical issue or anything in the marriage, and I didn't realize it was more mental and emotional and this heaviness, and I didn't realize like the depression and stuff until after I was out a ways and I was on my own. And then people would tell me all the time, like, you just have this glow about you, or did you lose weight? And 20 pounds melted off of me without any effort, just being free. And so it does affect your health, even if you think you're healthy or whatever. It's affecting you physically, everywhere. And it was amazing to wake up and just be happy in that calmness and control of your environment.
Yes.
Huge. And the kids noticed. My kids, are so supportive. It took time for them to see, the difference between then and now. And they're just, I feel like they got to see it too. And it was helpful for them.
That's
100%.
Sabrina.
Victoria.
Mine actually went the exact opposite of Sharmon. I actually put about 20 pounds on when I left the toxic relationship I was in, and a lot of that was because I was working myself out 1-2 times a day. I was restricting calories in order to find something I was good at. I was told on a daily basis that I was basically useless and dumb and an idiot, and having the accolades that would come to me because of my fitness, being thin, how did you do it, and pulling in the praise and the encouragement and the questions regarding my health was like what was feeding me as a person in order to feel any sense of goodness in my life. And I got down to a really scary weight for a really long time. I went bulimic for quite a few months, probably about 5 or 6 months, where I couldn't work out as much as I was because schedules changed. So then the only way to alter my weight was to eat and then puke in order to stay that, ideal weight that was bringing me the power that I felt. And it was the only place in my life where I felt like I was doing well, because it was the only thing that he couldn't punish me for. It was the only thing that he couldn't like knock me for or tell me that I was doing it wrong. And I really came to an understanding afterwards that, and I didn't even know it while it was happening. I wasn't like in it thinking I'm going to work out and try to burn 1,200 calories today. Like I would actually have goals of like trying to burn off everything that I ate, even though I barely ate anything. And it really got super unhealthy. And it wasn't until I left and I slowed down, much like what Leann was saying, where she was like, I felt like I was in a constant, like, I don't exactly remember the word she used, but it was something that made me feel like this and that I related to. And once I got to slow down and have my own space and my own haven and my in a quiet home is when I really started to realize like, hey, I don't need to be, working out like a fiend. I don't need to be restricting my calories like this. And then finally, through COVID and I broke my leg, I've now gained more weight. But, for that short time afterwards, I felt like good. I felt so good and so healthy in my body and didn't feel like I was fiending for attention or for power from anywhere, because I felt safe where I was. So it can go either way.
Absolutely.
Everyone deals with it differently. Anything else, Torie?
No, thank you.
No problem. And we have Leann.
Hi. Yes, I've so enjoyed this conversation today. I'm Leann Lazar. I am a dating and relationship coach for single parents. And I cover everything from divorce, relationships, co-parenting. I really lean into the co-parenting thing as well, because it's a dynamic that when you are dating or when you are considering a new relationship, it's an added layer, and making sure everyone feels good and you're making the right decisions coming from a very clear place. And in my experience, I've been divorced for almost 4 years now, and my kids are really thriving. I have a really phenomenal co-parenting relationship with my ex-husband. We are in a really great relationship. It's one that I envisioned and I believe manifested, as we've all been talking about that. A lot of us on here are very energetic in our thoughts and our mindset, and I completely believe that I created it, not only by manifesting it and envisioning it, but also making decisions and choices with my actions and my words and how I was communicating to allow for that to come in. And it took a while. It was never terrible, but it was stressful for periods of time. But we're very close. I really love the relationship that we now have. We are supporting each other in our dating life, which is great. I didn't ever think I would be in that position of actually appreciating and enjoying someone romantically involved with my ex-husband, but it's been that's a lot of healing. That's a lot of healing and acceptance and coming from a very honest, true place. So I think we've talked a lot about a lot of different things. I think my question would really be for everyone here today, what is your current relationship in a co-parenting situation, or your relationship with your ex now. What does it look like, and is it something that you enjoy or appreciate? Yes, Torie.
First of all, I'm so glad you asked this question because I literally have it written down, but I chose this one, so it makes me really happy because I wanted to know. So I did the same thing with just like envisioning it over and over and over again, no matter how impossible it was. And it took a while. We hated each other's guts for a while. We couldn't be in the same space. It was like drop off always, with like, I mean, we barely saw each other. It was just like, and now we will go out to dinner, with my son. We have a great relationship. We talk every single day. So the custody arrangement is every other weekend, just dad's schedule, but he picks my kid up from daycare 3 days a week and spends 3 or 4 hours with him and then drops him back off at my house. And, when I pick up my kid, we always stay and talk. And then, when he drops off my kid, he always stays and talks. And he was asking me cooking advice the other day. Like, I really love our relationship now. It was almost like we ended the marriage to save the relationship because
Wow.
we are better now than we ever were when we were together romantically. And I'm just I'm so thankful for my relationship now.
I love that. I love hearing stories like that. I didn't know that was a possibility. And like I had mentioned earlier, I have examples of that around me. I mean, I have a couple of friends that we get together with our current significant others and our exes and the kids and barbecue and all the things. We celebrate holidays together. And, the reality is my kids are super happy. Like all the kids involved in these dynamics, they don't feel an ending or the tension. It's fluid. And that was one of the things that I envisioned. I wanted the fluidity. I wanted to have also the same respect on both sides, right? So if you're fluid in my space with the kids, or if I need you to take them because of something going on, I want the same respect on the other side. And I think respect was one of the things that was probably lacking during most of the relationship in that regard, and allowing the other person to be there. But it's beautiful. It's great. Torie, I'm so glad you have that relationship. I do as well. We talk almost every single day, in a healthy way. And, when I'm giving my ex-husband, coaching him on his relationship, we've really come a long way. So does anybody else have anything to share, Sabrina or Lisa?
So my circumstance is interesting. My son's father, not married. I already explained that, but my son is now 17. So when we first split, it was not a good split at all. It was absolutely horrible. I ended the relationship because of religion. He was not a Jehovah's Witness. I was trying to get back in. I was trying to rekindle my relationship with God and with my family and all of that. So with that, he was not a Jehovah's Witness. So I had to make a decision. So I left the relationship. He was super mad at me. And within 6 months after cutting off the relationship, he decided to just move out of state and basically disappear. So probably about 5 or 6 years in, single mom status, barely paying my bills, all the things that go along with that, he starts to trickle back in. And I had to make a decision. Am I going to allow this, or am I not going to allow this? And am I going to be able to put my feelings aside or not put my feelings aside? And I was already starting to get into personal development at that point for a few years, and already starting to open up and wake up, and all the things that happen to us when we start to realize that there's different ways of doing things than the way that we were originally taught. So I decided to open up and be fine and talk and speak and be normal. And he started to hang out with my son. And my son is probably 5 or 6 at this point. 11 years, now my son's 11, So we've been good now for a few years. I start to press my son's father for child support. He hadn't paid me child support that entire time, zero money, although he was seeing him pretty regularly. And in reaction, I guess, to me pressing him on like, hey, can you throw me a bone here? He had just recently met somebody, was engaged. Her son had a child. He decided to just kidnap my son. Just like one summer was like, hey, can I take him camping? And I was like, yeah, sure, because everything was fine. And then he just didn't give him back. So he wrote me this long email basically saying, thank you so much for your service for the past 11 years, but I got it from here. And I, of course, had an absolute meltdown. I was by myself. I had no family, no friends around me. And I didn't know where he lived because he had just moved in with his now fiance. And he cut me off of all social media. It was this whole thing. Went through the court system, cost me $18,000, this whole thing. I obviously hated him. Like I wanted to. I've never understood, and I'm like saying this out loud, I probably shouldn't, but I've never really understood how people could like kill people. You know, like how could you kill a person that you once loved? How could you like murder someone? And literally in those first few months of just the ridiculousness that comes with divorce, but in this case it was child custody. He was fighting me for full custody, just out of the blue. I wanted to murder him. Like I literally wanted him to die. And I was just broken on so many angles. And to go from like, everything was fine on a Saturday, and then Sunday the whole thing just turned, and I realized the manipulation. I realized he had this whole thing planned for a while. The things and the games that he played during that whole thing were just ridiculous. And again, I was stuck with, I have a choice again on whether or not I'm going to go this route or this route. And thank goodness I had done even more research on personal development and personal growth. And it took me maybe 2 years. The whole custody battle lasted a full year, literally August to August. And within a year, I put my sword down, and for the sake of my son, we are fine again, somehow. I don't even know. But we talk cordially. And we have my son's best interest at heart. And it just goes to show that you have the capability if you really want to. If you really want to. It's intense, though. Takes some soul searching.
Yes. And a lot of forgiveness.
A lot of forgiveness. Yeah. We've never talked about it. It's never been in discussion. I just decided that I wasn't gonna go there, you know.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's insane.
Yeah.
Did you then come to the agreement of having 50-50 custody? Or?
Yeah. Well, no. So he gets him every other weekend, and then he has him for the majority of the summer. So that first summer was horrible because I just had anxiety that he was just his wife is originally from Mexico. And she actually still has family there, and they still go there. So I had this overwhelming feeling that first summer that he was just going to disappear to Mexico. I was literally crying like every other day, like a crazy person, just losing it. And but he didn't. He's still here, and it was not fun. It wasn't cool. It just wasn't, there's nothing else to say other than what he did just wasn't cool. But yeah, he gets him. He's actually with his father this weekend. Wow. So, but my son's 17 now. So it's a whole nother, my son wants to be here hanging out with his friends and chilling going to the gym. And so it's a tug right now. And I think my son's kind of hovering a lot of that over him right now because he knows that he didn't really see him, for years. And he remembers and he recalls and he remembers him and I struggling financially. So, but that's not my problem, you know, that's his dad's problem. So, and I talked to him openly about that, you know, that he has to mend that. That's not for me to, you know, I speak very nicely about his dad. I don't speak harshly about him at all. I always tell him that his dad's very smart, very kind, very handsome, and has a lot going for him. He's very successful. And I tell him that he has the same attributes. You're also very handsome and successful and smart and brilliant. So I don't highlight the negatives, but you can't like erase the memories of either, you know.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's a lot of times what people don't realize.
Yes.
When they're going through it.
Amy?
I think that's something important to do with kids is that because, you know, the kid is a part of that other person, right? And that kid knows that, like, hey, I'm half dad, half mom. And so when dad or mom is this horrible person, you know, you can't. I have a friend who dad was a horrible person, and she just kind of she like hid all that and sugarcoated all that. You know, that the daughter would one day realize, and daughter did one day realize, because daughter then one day went through the same abuse that mom went through. And so I don't think that, you know, you want to do that, because that didn't work out well. But, you know, just being open and honest with your kids, especially, you know, and of course age appropriate, but that whole thing of letting kids, you know, letting those kids know that they get to decide, because sometimes the kids are going to have some of those same anger tendencies that mom or dad had, or, you know, whoever. They're going to have some of the same tendencies that are negative from both of you. I know that I look at my kids, and the things that I dislike about them the most are when I'm seeing myself in them, you know. And so I'm, you know, just teaching them and speaking life over them, that they can choose how they respond when they're angry, or they get to, you know, so that they don't just think that, oh, well, I'm part of this, the bad of this person, and so that's just who I am. And especially, you know, when there is tension, or when it's not perfect and everybody's not getting along lovely. I think it's so awesome that some of you have it where it is lovely, but I know that it's not always like that for everyone. And just being careful of how you speak to kids. And I don't know if anyone has any examples of how they've dealt with some of that, but just how kids are spoken to, I think is huge.
Absolutely.
I agree, and I just want to send love to you all. I have to bow out. It's been a wonderful opportunity to spend this time with you. Hope to see you again.
You too, Lisa. Bye.
As my son is getting older, he is exhibiting more of his dad. He looked just like me when he came out, and he just always did. And so I, you know, there are some tendencies that he has that my ex-husband had, and, you know, I notice them, but I don't mention them, and like to either one of them, because it's like, I mean, like you said earlier, like more is caught than is taught, I think, how you put it. Yes. And so like I have friends, and, you know, so many examples of people being like, that's what your father did, don't do that. And it's like, you know, when I notice those things that come out with my kid, it's like I do something different. It's like I don't acknowledge them. I don't say anything about his dad, nothing like that. But one thing that I really try to play up is his physical attributes that match his dad. Like he has his dad's mouth, like he has like exactly his smile. And so like I'll talk about that with him, or I'll be like, you're gonna be tall like your dad, or like something like that. Just like something that has nothing to do with abuse or anything like that, but just like, you look like him, and that is something to be really proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Very cool. I do the same thing with Elijah. Yeah, absolutely the same thing. All right, ladies, anything else? We have worked through everybody. This was a great amount of people, because it's literally 2 hours. I can't even imagine if we would have had more. So this was absolutely great. Does anybody have any more, any closing thoughts?
I think that this has been, I really enjoyed this roundtable discussion. I think that the amount of people on here allowed us to go a little bit deeper and share a little bit more
100.
of our own experience and really thoroughly, answer and respond to things. And I so enjoyed everyone sharing their experience, their story, being vulnerable, putting it out there, and also, supporting other women and just and being there for everyone else that's potentially going through something. And I think that collectively we represent change on the other side. Divorce is not terrible. It's not fun to go through. It's definitely challenging. That you're strong enough, you are worthy, you do have you're worthy of whatever life you want to create, and everyone's going to be okay. Just dive into personal growth, dive into meditation and support and helping yourself. And, your next phase of your life will soon start to blossom. So thank you for having us, Sabrina.
Yes. Anybody else?
I just want to gush a little bit. When I first got the email to talk about, divorce, divorce is such a negative, it has so many negative connotations. And so I was a little bit nervous just because I am so thankful for my divorce. I feel as bad as it was in spots, I just feel it was such a great experience, and I'm so glad that I went through it and all those things. And so I was a little nervous coming on here, but this has been so uplifting and encouraging and stories of triumph over and over. So I'm so thankful for, number one, you, Sabrina, having this platform and having this goal of the idea of triumph after hardship and all this stuff. And then all of you guys for bringing that energy to it as well.
100%.
I agree with Torie. I was a little nervous, but it's been such a positive thing. Just love you, Sabrina.
Well, listen, it wouldn't be anything if it wasn't for you guys. So, I do, sorry if I get emotional, I do have a dream here of what I'm trying to create, and it wouldn't at all be possible if it wasn't for ladies like you who are willing to come on and share bits and pieces of your story in order to be there and to encourage other women out there. So, the whole process is a cycle basically, and the end that I see is being able to, 5-10 years from now have females that are listening now who 5 years later can come on and say, because you started this podcast, because of Leann, because of Marie, because of Torie and Christine and Amy and Lisa and Sharmon, I heard that. And now 5 years later, I'm here now speaking with you, and I'm able to share my story. And it starts with this, it starts with us and opening up and sharing the things that we've gone through that you don't necessarily want people knowing the itty bitties about, but helping people realize that it's going to be okay. And there are people that have gone through what you've gone through previously, and we're still here, and we're still standing, and we're shining bright. Because a lot of times when you're in that darkness, it's hard. It's hard to see anything other than darkness. And, having you guys share your stories gives people just that little bit of light that they need.
And I just want to say, I think when you're in the darkness, for most people at some point, we go into shame, and we go into this feeling of, I am broken. It is my fault. I have created this. And you are not alone. You are not the first person to go through what you're going through, and you're not the last. And each of our stories is individual, but also universal. So please know that there is help for you. There are women out there to support you. There are resources. And even if you are struggling financially and you can't afford a therapist or a coach, there are free resources, in terms of people, but also platforms like this, go to your library, find a book, read other women's stories, because their stories are your story, and you are so much stronger than you think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that you're saying that, because one of the things that I want, as I'm building out the website for the podcast, one of the things that I do want is to be able to have a whole tab just filled with help, hotlines and charities and places that these people can go. When I was going through my stuff, I had no help from anybody. I was so naive to the world because of my bubble of religion. I didn't know that there was things and places that you could call and do and go to. So one of the things that I do plan on doing is growing, a huge list, segregated by state or something, where, women can go and click and find exactly what they're enduring and find a place near them that they can connect with or call or get on a Zoom call, like something like this, to share their experiences with, because that's what it is. It's community. So absolutely. I thank you ladies so much for everything. If you guys could hang tight while I close out here, just so we can kind of say goodbye intimately, I'd appreciate that. But I'm going to go ahead and close out. So thank you so much for joining us here at Her Version. If you have an amazing story to share of struggle to triumph, be sure to reach out to me here or at herversion.life. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I am so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others. Have an amazing day. Much love.